Truth Frequency Radio Network. KTFRN. Worldwide.
Welcome, Shadowland Voyagers. In the spirit of sovereignty and self-empowerment, we invite you to journey with us into the Shadowland. Let's rediscover, reclaim, and integrate the fragmented aspects of our individual and collectively held consciousness. Realize true freedom and restore authentic expression. Could it be the only way out is through the Shadowland?
Good evening, everyone. This is Sienna Leah, and you're at Shadowland Voyagers. I'm here with Christina Grant.
Good evening, everyone.
And with Elizabeth Hansen.
Good evening, everyone.
We are so excited. We have a really extraordinary, brilliant, inspiring man that we have been basking in his 30-odd books and an amazing amount of material. His name is Andrew Harvey, and he is here with us tonight. He has just published recently a book called Radical Passion, Sacred Love and Wisdom in Action. We'll be talking about that. And we will be talking about with his own journey through the Shadowland, the reemergence of the dark feminine, the gifts this archetype brings to us all at this time to help us transmute incredible outrage, live passionately, birth compassionate energy, and endurance to face the ordeal of our time. These gifts, Andrew believes, are essential to the success of all of our sacred activism. Andrew Harvey is the founder of the Institute of Sacred Activism, an international organization focused on inviting concerned people to take up the challenge of our contemporary global crisis by becoming inspired, effective, and practical agents of institutional and systemic change in order to create peace and sustainability. Sacred activism is a transforming force of compassion in action that is born of a fusion of deep spiritual knowledge, courage, love, and passion with wise radical action in the world. The large-scale practice of sacred activism can become an essential force for preserving and healing our world. Andrew was born in South India in 1952, where he lived until he was 9 years old. He left India to attend private school in England and entered Oxford University in 1970 with a scholarship to study history. I believe he was the youngest ever to get a scholarship there. At the age of 21, at 21 is when he became the youngest person ever to be awarded a fellowship to All Souls College, England's highest academic honor. In 1977, Andrew became disillusioned with life at Oxford and returned to his native India, where he had a series of mystical experiences and initiated his spiritual journey. Over the next 30 years, he plunged into different mystical traditions to learn the secrets and practices. Stay with us, and we will come back with this remarkable soul, Andrew Harvey. Welcome back. This is Sienna Leah. I'm here with Christina Grant and Elizabeth Hansen and our incredible guest, Andrew Harvey. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening. How lovely to be with you.
There's no way I could get through your biography in 3.5 minutes. That was just not going to happen. It is so vast and so in-depth. But I do want to just go back to saying that in 2012, and this is the last thing I'll read because we want to hear you talk in every possible second we can. In 2012, Andrew, your latest book, Radical Passion, Sacred Love and Wisdom in Action, was published by North Atlantic Books. This culmination of Andrew Harvey's life work bridges the great divide between spiritual resignation and engaged spiritual activism, a manifesto for the transformation of the world through the fusion of deep mystical peace with the clarity of radical wisdom. It is a wake-up call to put love and compassion to urgent, focused action. And according to you, Andrew, we are in a massive global crisis, reflected mass media addicted to violence and trivialization at a moment when the world ardently needs something completely different. And you have done a huge study and work, written over 30 books, and a return to the heart-centered way of the divine feminine is central to your work. And we want to, yes. So good evening, magnificent being.
Thank you. We're in this tremendous crisis. I think everybody at 3 o'clock in the morning knows that the world is facing potentially its most defining crisis. But it's an evolutionary crisis, and the hope in the great death that's happening everywhere, and you can see it in the environmental holocaust, you can see it in the billions of people who are starving, you can see it in the eruption of wars everywhere, you can see it in the paralysis and apathy that are affecting millions of people as the crisis darkens. The hope is that this death is also crucible for a great birth, a birth that's going to be birthed by the divine feminine, and a birth that's going to help humanity get to the next level of divine embodiment, where it can work co-creatively with the divine to create a wholly new way of being and doing everything. So these are terrible times and amazing times, apocalyptic times, but also times in which enormous possibilities are being opened up for us if we're brave enough to reach for them.
Yes, and we want to dive into, for a bit in this first part of the show, a bit about your life, Andrew, where you were born, your scholarship, and your spiritual awakening. What brought you through, and I know we could spend a day or a month on your life because it's been so full of incredible experiences. But just for the listeners to know you a bit as a human being, could you speak to us of your early life and how it led you to a spiritual awakening?
Thank you so much. I was born in India, and I think that is probably the most crucial thing about my life, because from the very beginning of my life, my whole being was rooted in the sacred passion of India. I was born in South India, which is sacred to Shiva, in fact in Tamil Nadu, which is traditionally known as the dancing ground of Shiva. And Shiva is the divine as dancer, dancing with the opposites, dark and light. And my whole life has been, in a way, this dance. I was born in India of British parents, although my father had a little Indian blood. So from the very beginning, I felt part of the East and part of the West. When I was 9 years old, I went to England to be put through the Swab concentration camp of English education. I overachieved vastly, and at 18 I went to Oxford, and at 21 I was elected to become a Fellow of All Souls College, which is an elite college and which was the highest academic honor. But as soon as I got to where I wanted to be, I realized the hollowness of the world I wanted to be in. And I spent very, very painful years having disastrous love affairs and realizing the limitations of the Western way of doing things, and also coming to understand that we were in a very, very dangerous time, a time in which the world was being destroyed and in which a Western hunger to dominate and exploit nature was potentially ruining everything. So the combination of great personal unhappiness and growing awareness of the global disaster led me at 25 to return to India, to return to the place where I'd been born and spent my childhood. And I wasn't going back really to plunge into an ashram or to get a fancy Sanskrit name. I was just really going back to be healed by the sun and the smells and the mangoes and the colors and the indefinable, mysterious, sacred atmosphere of India that I'd always loved. And it was in that year, when I was 25, living in a small room by the sea in Pondicherry, that I had a series of utterly unexpected mystical experiences which showed me that everything that I had ever understood about reality and all the so-called learning I'd acquired in various languages and various disciplines had not prepared me at all for the truth of divine reality. I'd just like to share with you perhaps two of those experiences because, in a way, those experiences that happened at the beginning of the path define so much of what your particular path is going to be.
Yes.
The first experience was in a place called Mahabalipuram, which I've always loved and gone back to many times. It's by the sea in South India. It used to be a funky, lost, very quiet fishing village. It's now a bit tartier and wilder, but then it was one of the most romantic, absolutely peaceful places in the world. And I had been visiting the shore temple there and had a dinner, and afterwards was walking with my shoes off along the sea. And suddenly, it seemed as if my mind had been thrown like a coconut against a wall, exploded quietly, and I saw the divine light shining from everything. This divine light, as anyone who's ever seen it, and I'm sure many of you listening have glimpsed it or see it regularly, is a diamond white light. It is a pure white light, and everything is radiating with it. In fact, everything is created from it. Everything is crystallized light, energy. And that was the first time I saw the whole universe bathed in this radiance. It was an astounding and scary experience. And as I walked on, I noticed that my footprints were radiating light, and this, of course, filled me with joy. I thought, oh my God, I must be the Buddha or Jesus at least. But I saw that everybody else's footprints were also radiating with light, which was slightly annoying for an Oxford scholar. And then I got to my room, and I had a copy of the Upanishads, and I opened it, and it said, when you are ready, you will hear the sound Om and see the light. And at that moment, I heard the sound Om echoing throughout the universe. It was a very big experience for me and completely frightened me because I thought I was somebody and I was something, and I thought I knew something. And here I was being ushered into a world in which I was a complete neophyte. But my God, what a beginning to a journey. I'm so grateful for it.
Andrew, can I ask you, did you feel that this light was it conscious?
Oh, yes. You can't see the light without being aware that you're seeing the light with its own eyes. Mm-hmm. Because seeing that light, you know that it is the light of your own consciousness, the light of everybody else's innate consciousness, and the light that's creating the entire cosmos. Mm-hmm. Rumi said something wonderful. He said, God is an eternal shattering light. And as you evolve, you begin to peel away the barriers between you and yourself. And as you come closer to your deep self, this light starts to come up in and as everything. The second experience really was a dream, and it was a very powerful dream. It was more than a dream, it was a vision. I think everybody probably who's listening knows the difference between powerful dreams and what I would call dream visions that last you a whole lifetime. They never go away. They seem to come. They do come from a divine place, and they mark the journey in a very deep way and give you a clue as to what you are doing, what you're meant to do with your life. And in this dream, I was on the beach that I love so much and have gone back to so much, this great curved golden beach of Mahabalipuram. And I was sitting on it, and I saw the most beautiful being coming towards me. And at first, he or she, I couldn't tell which, was about 300 yards away, but I could already feel the emanation and power radiating from this being. And as he or she, and I couldn't tell which they were, was coming towards me, I was filled with tremendous, tremendous joy and tremendous peace. And this being then came and put her head in my lap, just lay down in my lap and gazed up at me. And I asked this being, "Who are you?" And the being said, "I am you." And I awoke, really completely awash with mystery, but on meditating on the dream, I came to understand that I was beginning a process through the grace of God, through which in the end I would meet my true, sacred, androgynous, divine, human self. And that if I had the patience and the will and the discipline to just continue hoping and searching and doing the inner work that was necessary, one day I am that being who was my innate divine self would become increasingly one. And really that's been the whole of my search, to become one with my own deeper self in my mind and heart, soul and body, so that I can truly represent in my own way, as a flawed Andrew Harvey, the divine person that lives inside me, and encourage other people to do the same in their own lives.
Mm. And I know that you have gone through such an incredible journey, and this is the vision and mission of this show, although there are very few we will ever get on this show who can articulate what authentic presence really is. And so I feel so grateful that you are on this planet and that we are speaking at this time, and we can, even in a small way, be a part of putting this out, because so many people are talking about becoming the authentic self and reclaiming empowerment and sovereignty. But there are very few that can really articulate it in a way that inspires us to, and also the level of going through the darkness. I mean, I followed your work fairly extensively, and I know that you went through the dark night of the soul with, and you when you wrote the book, The Sun at Midnight. And I don't know if you want to go into any of that tonight. I totally.
That too. I think it's very important. I think to become your essential self, it is very, very important to connect with the transcendent. It's very important to have the great mystical experience of transcendent bliss, of transcendent peace, of transcendent joy. And you can obtain these experiences through grace and through great discipline. But the danger is that you use these transcendent experiences as a subtle heroin, as a subtle drug, to escape the much more difficult and grueling business of being in the body in an exploding world, surrounded by damaged, wounded people like yourself, making terrible messes like yourself in relationship. So you can use, as many mystics do, the transcendent understanding of oneness as a way of escaping the real work of oneness, which actually begins with the transcendent experience, and then, if you're very, very lucky, forces you into the depths of the shadows. So you integrate what you're wanting to escape from. Authentic oneness is not just oneness with the light, it's also oneness with the dark, because the divine is dancing in both the light and the dark, in both order and chaos, in both transcendence and immanence, in both soul and body, in both the pain and the ecstasy. And one of the great limitations of our current new age is that it characterizes the divine only in terms of the light, in terms of peace, in terms of joy, in terms of prosperity, in terms of success. And actually the divine teaches us sometimes even more deeply in failure, in despair, in pain, in sorrow, in loss. And that until you really come to your own dark night and are compelled to descend into the darkness of reality, into the darkness of one aspect of reality, into the suffering, into the horror, and into your own suffering and horror that collude with that suffering and horror and keep it going, you're really ignorant. And I'm very grateful for the dark night that I went through, which was a very prolonged one and very, very devastating one. All dark nights are. I want to make a distinction between what I would call trauma and difficulty and the dark night. People use the word the dark night, the phrase, very, very loosely, but actually the dark night is something that happens to you quite far along the path. It happens when you have immersed yourself in the light, in the reality that the light reveals, after you have been truly infused by that light, and have become tempted to use the new powers that that light brings for your own ego, and that gets you into a terrible mess which then explodes and starts to destroy your subtle ego so that your divine self can be released. This is known in the great mystical systems. It's known in Vajrayana, it's known in Christianity, it's known in the shamanic systems, and it is the great ordeal of the path. How it happened to me was that I had a Hindu guru called Mother Meera, whom I loved deeply, passionately, spiritually, and was a devotee of for 15 years. When I was 41, I met the man who would later become my husband, Eric Hanut. I fell very deeply in love with him and him with me, and this love was something I'd always longed for but never had, and now it was there, and I thought that she, as a person claiming to be the Divine Mother, and so all-embracing and all-tolerant, would be welcoming of it. But in fact, I'd become her chief disciple in many ways, and I'd written a book called Hidden Journey, which made her well famous, and she said to me, you must become a heterosexual, you must give up Eric, and you must become celibate and just devote yourself to me. At which moment I realized she couldn't be the Divine Mother, that I had, in one way, been chasing an illusion in worshipping her as the Divine Mother, and my whole world exploded. Because what happened was that I did leave her. Eric and I returned from Germany, where she was living, to Paris. She then
we have to go to break right now. We definitely want to dive into this and hear more. We'll be right back. Excuse us, Andrew. We have to take this break. Welcome back, everyone. Andrew, I'm so sorry to cut off the flow of your discussion of the Dark Night.
Not at all, not at all.
I'd like you just to pick it up and go on from here because...
Well, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
I was saying that I'd been a devotee of an Indian guru, a Divine Mother, and that she had really enchanted my soul, and that when I was 41, I met the love of my life, who became my husband, and she told me to get rid of him and become heterosexual and become celibate if I wanted to continue as her disciple. And then she lied about it, and for 3 years, our lives were plunged into total hell. We had death threats, we were humiliated, my reputation was annihilated, and people accused me of lying because when you have to choose between somebody who people who somebody that people are adoring as the Divine Mother, and a renegade gay mystic, of course you choose the Divine Mother. But
is that right?
Terrible though this experience was, it was also profoundly beautiful and transforming. And I came to know that in my deepest being, that the process of the dark night is in itself a marriage of opposites. And this is important, I think, not just to understand the dark night personally, but to understand it in terms of the great global dark night that's now taking place.
Yes.
On one hand, I saw the process it burns down and destroys and undoes the false self. But on the other, it opens up the real self to wholly new levels of sacred passion and ultimate knowledge of God. But for me, and I think this is what's going to happen, I feel it's happening now on a global scale, what happened in my dark night is that it bitch-slapped me awake and it radicalized me. It turned me from a mystic obsessed with the inner world into someone actively involved in changing the structures of society and the ways in which power is distributed and exercised. You see, in a prolonged and frightening way, the corruption of one accepted system of power, that of the Guru system and its advocates, made me far more sensitive than I'd ever been before to the ruthless effect of power in general. When you get raped by one form of patriarchal power, that rape is an initiation into the way these kinds of structures of cold evil are raping and pillaging and genociding the whole planet. So the connections in my dark night between all systems of domination, religious, political, and economic, began to be painfully clear to me, not just intellectually, but viscerally. And I began to understand, not just with my mind, but with my heart and my guts, that these very systems that rule our religions and corporations and political parties are what keep us radically disempowered and paralyzed and depressed. The other thing I understood, and this was more difficult and more shaming really, is that all the madness and cruelty and injustice that we see out there are actually emanations from a false self, dangerously out of control.
Yes, we would like to dive into that a bit more here, if you could. That's exactly what this show is about, because even though we believe in sacred activism, without the other, it becomes a hypocritical projection of our own shadow contents out into the world, and becomes a very dangerous reaction to an action that feeds the darkness in our philosophy as well.
Well, if you read my book, The Hope, and you'll see that one of the laws, the 7 laws of sacred activism, is prolonged and humble and grueling shadow work. And the reason is this, and you said it so beautifully, if you don't do this shadow work, you will not become an authentic sacred activist, because an authentic sacred activist looks at 2 very immense shadows, and very dangerous shadows. The shadows of the mystic and the shadows of the activist. The shadow of the mystic is an addiction to transcendence, an addiction to sensational mystical experience, an addiction to a bypass through bliss and peace of the grueling work of truly integrating divine and human reality. And we see all around us in the New Age all kinds of desperate bliss bunnies who are using so-called mystical experience as a way of signing off from the responsibility of turning up and witnessing justice and compassion in an exploding world. The shadow of the activist is just as damaging, and it's an addiction to doing, an addiction to reacting to perceived and real injustice out of indignation, blame, rage, and it's also an addiction to righteousness, to being the one who isn't like the wicked ones who are despoiling the planet, and it's also an addiction to burnout. And that's why I think so many of the activist movements, the environmental movements and others, very deeply intentional and very, very noble though they are, have proved so ineffectual, because the consciousness that's driving them is full of shadow material, full of rage at others, full of the desire to be better than others, full of the desire to be more righteous than others. And until activists do that tremendously difficult shadow work that will reveal to them that there are parts in them as crazy as the CEO of Monsanto, as destructive as the worst serial killer, as manipulative as the most rotten dictator, until that kind of appallingly difficult shadow work is done, there will be no true compassion, and there will be no true understanding, and there will be no divine blessing, because the divine will not bless something that's partial. And so even the most well-intentioned causes will alienate others and not work. But the great good news is, and this is what my whole work is about and what my own life is about, is that if you dare to look at the shadow of the mystical side of you and the secret desire to escape from this difficult reality into a constructed heaven, an otherwhere, a blissful divine reality that has no real bearing on what's going on, and if you do the work of looking at the activist side in you and looking at its shadows, its messiah complex, its addiction to exhaustion, its very, very virulent self-righteousness, if you do that, then you slowly will become more and more able to marry the very best of the mystic with the very best of the activist. The very best of the mystic is the connection with divine truth and power and peace and passion, and the very best of the activist is the passion to see justice done, the passion to see the forests whole again, to see the poor fed, to see this devastatingly corrupt system of capitalism unraveled and a more just system put in its place, to see humanity living in harmony with nature. When you marry and fuse the fire of the mystic's passion for God, that noblest part of the mystical search, with the noblest part of the activist search, the fire of the passion for justice, when those two fires come together, there is a kind of secret nuclear reaction in the depths of yourself, and a third fire is born in you, which is the fire of love and wisdom in action. But you can only achieve, or have achieved in you, rather, through grace, that fusion, that third fire, by undertaking and continuing to undertake the grueling work of shadow work on both aspects of yourself. And that is, of course, just the beginning of shadow work, because you can be working on the mystic in yourself and the shadow of the mystic, and you can be working on the shadow of the activist. But if you're not also trying very humbly to get to grips with your own personal shadow that comes out of the karmic whirlpool from which you arrived here on this earth, and comes out of your relationship with your parents, your childhood wounds, the conditioning of the culture in which you grew up, your sexuality, your miserable or ecstatic experiences, if you're not always working on that as well and coming increasingly deeply to understand how things that you thought you knew are actually conditioned by that shadow knowledge, and whole ways of acting that you thought were right and just were actually saturated by this malfunction that comes from your past. Unless you're working in this way, three things will never happen to you. The first thing that will never happen to you is that you will never become humble. Because what shadow work gives you is a tremendous dark blessing, is a radical humility in face of the mystery of life. You come to understand through your own brokenness, the brokenness of everyone else, through your own exploration of the forces that have shaped your life. You come to understand much more deeply the forces that shape other people's lives, and including the forces that shape the lives of the people who are doing the destruction in the moment. That's the first thing. The second thing that you'll never come to unless you do this very, very difficult form of shadow work, this very complex form of shadow work, and do it a lot and do it incessantly, is that you'll really never be taken into the realm of unconditional compassion. Because as you begin to glimpse through your awe before the power of the shadow in your own life to destroy relationships, to make you stupid, to make you righteous, to make you exhaust yourself when you should be conserving your energy, to make you arrogant, to make you hungry for status and power, and mask that as a desire to help others, all the different ways in which the shadow dances in our lives. But never going to understand why people will do terrible, terrible things in order to try and shore up their insecurities and terrors. And so you'll never really understand either yourself or the people who are doing the destruction in the world, which we're all participating in, that have really been allow themselves to be taken over by those powers. And you'll never be able to have the only real truth that will help you to work with people of all times, and that is unconditional compassion for anybody, even the so-called worst person. And the third thing that you'll never have unless you do this kind of work is what the Buddhists call skillful means. Because only humility and compassion can give you the dark, sober, grounded, many-faceted wisdom that will enable you to be able to work with people of all kinds in all situations, not out of righteousness or separation or judgment, but out of a broken-hearted oneness with them at the deepest level, and out of a transcendent peace that accepts people and the situation just as it is, without needing to beautify it or to decorate it or to gussy it up. So what the ancient mystics and the alchemical tradition and the tantric traditions tell us when they say that the great treasures are hidden in the shadow is actually the whole truth. Because you look around, you see many people who've had extraordinary experiences of the light, but remain arseholes, let's say it, remain vain, remain believing that they have the truth, remain convinced that only their way can save humanity. And they will never be effective. They'll just continue in their own very, very comfortable delusion. Shadow work destroys any kind of comfortable superiority that you have over others, because it reveals to you that everything that you can't stand among people in the world is actually inside you. And that is the most powerful agent for unraveling the ego's obsession with itself and with power. And as this grows, grief grows, but also humility, compassion, and wisdom grow. And slowly, you are brought by the divine and by grace into a very subtle marriage of the deepest divine truth in you with the most shattered, humble humanity in you. And from that place, that mysterious place, you can love at a far greater depth all beings, and you can be far, far, far more useful to them, because you're no longer stuck in any kind of radiant dogmatism of your own.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wow. Facing the shadow is definitely one of the most difficult things, if not the most difficult thing one can do. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and honesty to do that.
It takes help. I don't think you can do it on your own, because it's called the shadow for a reason. You can't see it. Although all of your friends probably know it very well. I think in my case, I'd come to a place where I couldn't see it, but my life exploded, and I was compelled to realize that that explosion wasn't my own. I wasn't a victim in that explosion. I was also partly the perpetrator, and I had to understand the ways in which I'd conspired with the explosion to nearly destroy my life. So I really went on a long journey with a great Jungian analyst, who's still my analyst, called Nathan Schwartz-Salant, who was a genius and a wonderful man and very ruthless and very gentle. And for the last 6 years, I've been truly wedded to that uncovering of the shadow, both to save my own life and to become wiser, and not to be continually creating situations in which my unexpressed truths and desires and understandings explode in my face and create disaster, but also to be able to understand the world at this moment. So I feel that it's very hard to do shadow work on your own. You need somebody who's very, very wise, very tough, very naked, and very ruthless, whom you know loves you, but who you know will not let you get away with anything as a guide. Sometimes friends can do this for each other, but doing shadow work amongst friends is a dangerous business. So I really would recommend to people to invest in it, if they can, in a decent therapist, and to make it an important investment, because people sometimes say, therapist is just an expense, but actually, in a time like this, to do shadow work with somebody who can really help you is, I would have thought, a necessity for all politicians, all CEOs, all spiritual teachers, anybody who's trying to help people.
Absolutely. Yes, I had one of those teachers that was ruthless, loved me ferociously, and called me out ferociously. And I loved her and I hated her, and it was a 30-year relationship. She's crossed over now. There's no way I ever would have faced the depths of my shadow if she had not been such a deep lover of truth and life, and been so devoted and so relentless and so fierce with me.
Such a privilege to meet somebody who'll do that for you and with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's the highest kind of love, actually, because it's a very thankless task for them. Because if you're anything like me, I'm sure you resisted a lot and didn't want to face.
I was a nightmare. I can't believe she put up with it all of those years. It was an incredible miracle. And I bitched and moaned and made her bad and wrong every chance I get. I was just praying this afternoon, asking her forgiveness, and looking at the great grief I caused her. And now she's been dead as long as you've been in your analysis. And every day I have woken up to go, oh my God, the gift that woman gave me. It keeps on giving every day of my life.
And hasn't it helped you to really be more compassionate with the contemporary situation? Because I think before I did shadow work on myself, I was convulsed with rage and outrage at what people were doing in the world. And until I understood that I was doing bad, and until I understood just how tricky and devastating my own shadow was, I really had no true compassion for people trapped in their shadows, unable to deal with their shadows. Mm-hmm. So I think it's made me much wiser as a teacher, because instead of going to that place of outrage, which is an easy place to go to, I always try now, much more successfully than I did earlier, to understand why somebody is adopting that position, what trauma has driven them to it, what fear is governing them, what unacknowledged terror is guiding them into this wrong path. And that, of course, makes for a much greater, deeper love for the person, and sometimes a greater and deeper sadness, but also much more skill in really dealing with the person, because you, instead of reacting to your own repressed self-knowledge projected onto the other person as a demonization of them, you start to see the person through deep intuition as they truly are, and you start to intuit with very great broken heart and compassion, truly, what they are being driven by. And slowly you could do much more to help them from that position than you ever could from beating them on the head with a saucepan. Mm-hmm. Which is one of my favorite activities at one time.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Well, huge. This is very interesting, because I think that I probably left California right around the time you were going into this, you do seem quite different from the Andrew that I attended seminars with at that time, energetically.
Oh,
I mean, I always adored you, but yes, a big change energetically.
I think if you don't do the shadow work, you remain fixed in an unconscious role, and I think that I was in an unconscious role of the prophetic verbal mystic, and that's a wonderful role, and I hope I gave it my all, but it's not something that I can be at 60 with any degree of truth. At 60, you have to be making the transition into elderhood, into sagehood, whether you want to or not. And that means really looking at all of the unacknowledged motives that underlay what you did before. And that is a very sobering business, but it does mature you, and it does bring a much deeper level of understanding and peace and surrender to the divine.
Do you feel that shadow work clears the way for you to embody more of your eternal self?
Well, I would put it even more strongly. I would say that you have absolutely no hope of embodying anything including shadow work.
I would have to agree.
You know, because let's look at what that word embodiment, what we're really talking about is taking down the light inviting down the light into your mind, into your heart, into your body. That means that when you invite the light into your mind and truly pray for your mind to become a servant in the light, to the light, what happens is that you meet all the parts of your mind that are not at all in service to the light. Your vanity, your pride, your delight in your brilliance, your use of reason to cut everything into pieces, the ways in which the mind, as we trade it in the West, dances in brittle, sterile dances of separation. And it's very frightening to understand that so much of your mental activity is actually driven by that separating mind. And until you've fully faced all of that, how can you divinize it? You can only divinize it by facing everything in it that is separatist and elitist and damaging and very dark. So that, and we're doing so as far as possible without shame, and then asking the light to penetrate all of those parts and offering those parts up to the light. And the same is with the heart. You say you want to divinize your heart. You want to have a heart that is aflame with sacred passion. That's a wonderful vision, and everyone should have it. But as soon as you invite the fire of the divine love into your heart, what do you find? You find all the desires for power, all the desires for domination, all the desires to shame people, all the desires to humiliate people, all the desires to possess people, sexually or spiritually or emotionally, that the heart has harbored in secret. The light turns on in the room of the heart, but it doesn't reveal perfect order and wonderful paintings and lovely lighting. It reveals chaos. But that's the wonderful thing, because that's the beginning of the real path, because then, with your knowledge of the light's mercy and the light's kindness and the light's power, you can offer up all the chaotic and disordered desires of your heart and fantasies and cruelties of your heart to be purified and to be healed. And you can offer up the wounds from your childhood or from other lifetimes that have caused these patterns also up to the light to be healed. But until you know that you need healing, you can't be healed. And then you get to the body, and anybody who's tried to really look at their relationship with their bodies, God knows, I mean, my Lord, it's the most difficult thing in the world to really... You can talk up a blue streak about having a sacred body and about your body being a temple for the spirit, and this kind of jargon goes all around the airwaves and everybody says yes. But the truth is that when you start to bring the light down into your body, what happens? You meet all your hidden horror at your body, your hidden terror of the body that you're really dying, your hidden sex hatred and all the kinds of messages that you've ever been given about this.
Hang on, Andrew. Hold that thought. We're going to get right back to our bodies. Shut that voice. We'll be right. Stay with us.
Broadcasting worldwide in complete defiance of the U.S. Patriot Act and the NDAA.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
Welcome back, Shadowland Voyagers. Your experience, perception, and questions are deeply appreciated here. Join the conversation. Call in at 213-233-3998 or 888-832-2027.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Sienna Lee. I'm here with Christina Grant, Elizabeth Hansen, and Andrew Harvey. Andrew, this is just a 3-minute little section, and so I'm going to give a little recap, then we'll bring you back for a full half hour, and I want you to keep diving into where we left off. So we have a very devoted group of Shadowland Voyagers, and I just want to say this is such a groundbreaking night for us all. This is our 14th episode, Andrew, and we have explored Jung, we've explored the shadow from many different aspects, but here we have truly one of the great minds and human beings on the planet, a man who's written 30 books, a man who has done in-depth service to mankind, and a commensurate scholar, a Rumi scholar. The level of accomplishment has gone on and on. A man who could have written his own ticket in the world of academia, in the world of mysticism, and he walked away into his own shadowland. And he's here with us tonight to talk about the huge value and importance of that and how coming back through there is creating a whole new paradigm, a whole new picture of what sacred activism is, of what self-realization is, of what being a human being is. And I don't know anybody who is more articulate in the most poetic and divine and authentic and real way than you are, Andrew. So I'm actually trying to squeak words out like from a tube.
My shadow is loving this.
It's a celebration.
Yeah, I know. My shadow is jumping up and down for joy. Thank you very much. But there are many other people doing this work. I'm delighted to be just one of the workers in the dark. Because the dark is the Black Madonna. The dark is Kali, and Kali has great treasures to give us if only we're brave and mad enough to look for them.
Yes, I was hoping we could go into, in the second hour, the dark feminine, and your putting together your understanding of this huge power of the return of the mother, of the feminine returning. Everyone's talking about the divine feminine, and we've got the billion women rising all over the planet with the Eve Ensler project. I'm not putting anything down. All a part of it.
She's one of my best friends, so she's an amazing force. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And now she's got 200 countries all doing this dance to empower the feminine, for women standing for not being violated any longer. She's an incredible activist.
Yes.
Yes.
And she has been through her own dark night because she had a terrible wrestling with cancer. And that's when we became very close, because she she is a person who understands her shadow, the shadow of the culture and the shadow of what's been done to the feminine in a very passionate way. She's not at all naive. She's not really naive.
All right, we'll be right back. I would love to talk more about the dark feminine when we return. Andrew Harvey, stay with us. With Christina Grant, Elizabeth Hansen, and Andrew. Can you hear me? Is something weird with the phone? Is it okay? Yes, sometimes this happens. I would love to hear you weave in your experience with your shadow work, with the dark feminine, with however you are called to do that. If you would be up for that, Andrew.
Of course. I believe that we are in Kali's age, in Kali Yuga, in the great Kali transformation, and that if we don't face the dark feminine, the ferocity and creative destructiveness and agony and outrage of the dark feminine, we cannot possibly embody the mother's birthing force, that is the one force that can embody us and help us get through this vast death, rebirth crisis that we're living through. And I'd like to just tell a story about my own meeting with the Black Madonna at the very moment when my life began to fall apart, because I'd left my then guru, Mother Mira, because she told me that I couldn't be homosexual and I couldn't marry my husband and I had to become straight, and this precipitated an immense crisis, which was both internal and external, because she lied and created a whole field of violence around us. My husband nearly died of cancer, brought on by this, and we had death threats. It was a terrible time. Everything exploded. But at the beginning of this time, I was in Paris, and Eric and I went to visit the Black Madonna of Chartres. And for the first time, the Lady of the Pillar, I stood in front of her. And I had an overwhelming experience. What I understood was that the Black Madonna is the force of divine destruction and creation. And she is the non-dual mother whose absolute ferocious power is manifesting the entire cosmos. I also understood that what was astounding about the Black Madonna was that in her burned blackness, it was clear that she was sharing the pain of the whole creation. Because when I stood before the Virgin of the Pillar, a tear rolled down her cheek. It was an amazing moment, because I knew that I wasn't standing in front of an idol or an image. I was standing in front of the real mother, and that she was totally identified with the pain that we were going through, totally stricken by it, suffering it with us, suffering it in us. And that she was suffering and sobbing and howling and screaming and dying in and with all of her creations, so that there was an extreme sense, not only of her transcendent power, but of her absolute and immanent compassion. And I realized that the only force that could see me through the crisis that Eric and I were in would be the Black Madonna, and that the only force that could see the world through this great death rebirth process was the Black Madonna. What I came to realize is she was helping me to birth my inner non-dual Christ consciousness. And this is only possible in and under the Black Madonna and under Kali, because only she can take the adept into the depths of a non-dual identification, both with the transcendent and with the suffering of the immanent. You have to be one with transcendental peace, and one too with the agony of evolution in the immanent. You can't just be one with the great peace, you have to be one with the great suffering also. And only the dark one has the power to birth the realization that can only be born through an experience of the dark night of the soul. Because it's the dark night of the soul that shatters all the agendas, all the concepts, all the visions, all the spiritual understandings that you have built up till then. So to me, the Black Madonna is the force of the Divine Mother that I met at the very moment when I needed to plunge into unfathomable pain in order to dissolve the old structures of myself. And it was only her force that could sustain and see me through that suffering, and through divine grace, birth a new being, that suffering was preparing. About 3 months later, and as the crisis really became extreme, I was publicly humiliated. Eric was dying. Many old friends had betrayed us. I lay in the bath, and a lot of my visions come in the bath. I just said to her, to the Black Madonna, I said, I have no idea what you are doing, but I trust you. And I know now that when you destroy with this kind of ruthlessness, it's because certain things have to go for the new life to be born. I trust that it is an agony that I cannot endure on my own. You've got to help me. And you've got to help me now, because if you don't help me now, I will die, and I can't die because there's so much work to do, and also I must live to support my husband, and I must live to honor the work that you're trying to birth inside me. And so I just lay in the bath and I gave up everything to her. I don't think I'd ever surrendered so completely. And I came to this very quiet, dark, silent, infinite place which seemed to be at the bottom of the universe. And I realized I was residing in the very depths of the womb of the Dark One, where there is only limitless peace. And when I came back to myself, I looked around the room, and the whole room was gleaming with divine light, glittering with divine light. So in that experience, I think I lived through what I believe the whole world is now living through. I believe we're going through a global dark night. I believe that this global dark night is part of the mystery of the Kali force of the dark feminine, and that the Kali force of the dark feminine is putting us through this global dark night, but also sustaining us so that we can become strong enough and surrendered enough and peaceful enough and trusting enough of her mystery to allow the global dark night to shatter all of our addictions and agendas of power and domination and exploitation of nature, so that we can be taken by her to a wholly new level of non-dual divine consciousness, embodied consciousness. So this is what I think is happening. This is how I experienced it myself. And I am so glad that that dark night happened, because it taught me how to stay surrendered and steady in the middle of this utterly insane chaos that is now erupting everywhere, knowing that behind the chaos is the extraordinary organizing intelligence of the love of Kali for her creation, and her absolute will now to destroy everything that needs to be destroyed, so that a wholly new way of being and doing everything can emerge. It's a terrible process. It's going to cause untold misery. It's going to devastate large parts of the planet. We're not going to get through without being broken, but we're going to be broken by her. She will break and remake us. And fundamentally, what the Black Madonna is asking us to do is to give up to her, so that she can guide us, so that she can sustain us, so that she can feed us her peace, so that she can grow in us her great passion, and so that she can make us into her non-dual children, at home both with her great light and with her great alchemical darkness, marrying the two, so marrying the transcendent and the immanent, heart and mind, body and soul, prayer and action, to be born as creative agents of her great birth.
Oh, beautiful, Andrew. My God. Andrew, I have heard you say in one of your talks, I think the one about the Red Book, that the Galactic Center the huge explosions that are mega coming out of there all the time is the force that you're talking about. And as we know, in the December 21st, 2012, we have aligned with Galactic Center, so that and the planets and the photon belt and the galactic plane, so that we are like in a direct alignment with her, as we never have been. We're in
direct alignment with her as the divine light, and also as the divine darkness, as the divine creatrix, and as the divine destroyer. So we're now in the center of a vast alchemical crisis, and that's going to be both full of miracles and revelations and terrible disasters and strippings and burnings and searings. That's how she works. And coming to know her like that, and coming to accept that that's how she works, and coming to surrender to her, is the only way we're going to get through this. But it's not a passive surrender, because she's not passive by any means. She is also trying to fill us with her great, great sacred peace and her great, wild sacred passion and her hunger to see justice and compassion established in every realm and in every art and in every science and in every institution. She's trying to make us nothing less than wise and skillful revolutionaries of love in action, because that's what she is.
Wow. Well, she's got a lot of work to do.
Yes, she does, especially in the New Age, rendered totally comatose by false mysticism and by a desperate, desolate, materialist vision of God as being there just to satisfy our needs. The Secret is the ultimate abominable expression of this, and I think it was a kind of psychological and spiritual disaster when it became so popular, because at the very moment when the human race needed to be truly told that its ego was lethal, it was given the sanction by this ridiculous book to imagine that its ego could command God, could command the Black Madonna, the Kali force that's organizing the universe, to provide whatever McMansions and boys and girls and cash that it desired. This is insanity, total insanity in a moment like this, when it's quite clear that our agendas are suicidal and matricidal. If we go on pretending that prosperity and being fabulous and thin and wonderful and empowered and full of self-esteem and all the buzzwords of this insanely superficial age are the real goals of mystical life, if we continue to believe that, we're going to be as stupid as the CEOs and the politicians destroying the planet. She has a very different message to give us. And the message is, you're mad. You've chosen power over love. You've chosen fear over trust. You've chosen separation over unity. You're addicted to these things. And it's very hard for you to get out of these things, but I am going to create a crisis so great that you'll be compelled to look into the depths of the shadow of the world, of the corporations, of the political systems, and you're going to be compelled to face the depths of your own shadow. And that facing of the depths of the shadow of the world and of your own shadow will bring you finally to the moment where you will, at the end of the end of the end of the night, cry out to me, and cry out to know me without illusion, without mask, and to know that your job is to be so freed from those obsessions and shadows by making them conscious that you can at last start to turn up as my humble co-creative agent in reality.
Amen.
This is all a bit striking, all of you. I mean, I've been talking on and on, which of course I love, but...
Well, no.
It's been striking.
This is why we have you on. And this is all archived, and people can download this and access this for months to come. And we have a YouTube channel, also Shadowland Voyagers, so you'll be on YouTube. So, I mean, we need to get this message out. So we've been dumped so much that we need people who can really speak to the depths of what we're really about, because we need to rediscover the depths of the beauty and the gorgeous, the love of life that you so clearly reflect.
And the terror, because you can't really say you love life until you also love her in her destructive aspect. You can't love life without loving death. You can't love joy without loving and blessing suffering. You can't love without embracing the whole of the reality of life. Life is both a terrible and an extraordinarily beautiful experience. And without truly blessing the terrible aspect as just as sacred as the beautiful aspect, blessing failure as much as success, blessing agony as much as ecstasy, you'll never come to a true love of life.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so true. Andrew, can you talk a little about unlearning our learned helplessness?
Well, if you really look at our world as it is constructed now, you realize that the message that you're being given by the corporations, by the politicians, by the media that is constantly telling you that you're not beautiful enough, rich enough, famous enough, that you are truly impotent, isolated, and totally inadequate, and that there is very, very, very little that you can be or do that can make a difference unless you buy the product, unless you vote in the politician, unless you make your mega millions in the corporations. This is a perfectly constructed system to keep people atomized, isolated, impotent, paralyzed, deeply depressed, and hooked incessantly on false illusions and false goals and false aims. And it's the most dark and frightening system that has ever been set up, which is why it is destroying everything and practically destroying a great many human beings. So the first thing you have to do is to see it and analyze it and understand that you've been in an invisible fascist concentration camp of illusion in which you've been told and made to feel that you are totally impotent and that you can't ever be a real person until you're rich and beautiful and thin and constantly appearing on Oprah. This is the fantasy that is crippling our resolve to face the crisis. And this fantasy is kept going by every single aspect of our culture, and it produces a conditioned helplessness which is incredibly convenient for the very dark powers that are increasingly in control. It's incredibly inconvenient for the corporations because they can go on strip mining the world in full knowledge of most of us, but we feel so powerless through their very careful manipulation of us that we don't react. It's very convenient to the politicians who are owned by the corporations because they can manipulate the various systems of fear to bring
Welcome back, everyone. We're here with Andrew Harvey. Andrew, I would just love to have you pick up where you left off. We have a half hour left. I don't want to miss a moment.
Well, I'm not sure where I did leave off because that wild intervention.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy.
I think what we were talking about was learned helplessness. I was trying to sketch a picture of the shadow of our crisis, which is that we're in an invisible concentration camp of illusion, organized by very dark powers that have trained us in learned helplessness. And the first step is to really see that And when you do see that, you reel. It is simply terrifying, which is one reason why very few people dare to see it and know to really engage with it. Because the truth is that you can't truly engage with the depths of the deception and the control and the manipulation and the way in which we're deliberately being kept ignorant and disempowered so as to pose no threat to the continuing strip mining of the world. You can't open to that, you can't engage with that until you have uncovered at least partly your divine identity, because you will simply not be able to stand it if you haven't. What I come to understand is that this level of shadow work can't be done without consistent sacred practice that aligns you with your divine self. Because what that sacred practice does is to create a kind of bathysphere, one of those submarines that are very strong, which can enable you to go down into the Philippine trench of the shadow of this system and the shadow of this crisis and the shadow of your own shadow collusion with this crisis, and that is the only way you'll be able to stand it and bear it. Because what's happening is that we are all being deeply polluted psychically and spiritually by this exploding crisis and the 5 shadows that it emanates. And I've come to understand from my own innermost excavation of this shadow that there are 5 aspects to this shadow that is actually secretly working on all of us and hobbling us and keeping us helpless unless we bring these shadows into the light and work with them together, humbly and tenderly and with faith. The first shadow that we have to uncover, and I think we're all in it, is denial. I think very few of us can stand the real truth of our situation is that we're very close to midnight. The world could die, is dying, and we are changing far too slowly. And there is terrible suffering going on right now. Think of the 2 million displaced people in Syria. Think of the 200 species that are vanishing every day. And as soon as you start to train your mind towards that, you'll find, if you're honest, that your mind reels from it and tries to invent some kind of fantastic escape. There's not going to be an escape. We're going to have to go through this. So really to see the depths of how denial dominates our innermost psyche and keeps us in a state of wish fulfillment fantasy or magical thinking, that is a very, very important activity for anybody who wants to turn up and be useful. When you've uncovered your denial, I think then you get to disbelief. I think that what comes up is that you start to be unaware, to start to be aware of just how a part of you simply can't believe that we've been crazy enough and stupid enough and vain enough and cruel enough and dissociated enough to create a crisis this immensely destructive. But disbelief is very dangerous. And I'll tell you a story from my own experience, because recently I went back to the 13th village in India that I love to go to, and I went to visit one of my best buddies who's a fisherman there and whose young son I love very much. And I said, "Where's Raju?" And he started to cry. And he told me the story that Raju had been playing on the beach. They'd seen a huge wave. There's no word for tsunami in their language. They'd never seen a tsunami before, so they thought it was just going to break. 2 minutes later, Raju was dead. The whole village had been swept away. So if you don't believe that it is a potentially apocalyptic situation, or can't believe it, or in disbelief about it, then you'll never be able to prepare for it. Because like that fisherman, there'll be no word in your inner language for what is actually taking place now all over the planet. And when you make that shadow conscious, what you become conscious of, I think, I know, is an enormous dread. Because when you realize we're not going to get out of this, there are going to be no aliens saving us, there's not going to be the rainbow bridges, Arguelles very intelligently died before nobody turned up in 2012, right? And we are going to be we're going to have to go through it and have to trust the Black Madonna, who is the great architect of this crisis, to steer us through. But when you really do see what's happening, I think all of us are possessed by a terrifying dread, a dread at the enormity of the suffering, and a dread that we are here on the planet which is now exploding and in tremendous danger, a dread of what's going to happen to us, to the people we love, to our children, to nature, to the lions, to everything that's now threatened. And when you make that shadow conscious, I think something very, very painful happens to you, it certainly happened to me, and that is that you become overwhelmingly disillusioned by the human race. You face that for all your rhetoric of how fabulous we are, and how inventive and creative and how amazing our technology is, and how fantastic science is, and how divine we are if you buy the New Age trash without the shadow. For all of that stuff, we are also the human race that in the 20th century created concentration camps, the atom bomb, and went ahead with the exploitation of nature, knowing perfectly well that we were destroying it, and have created a system so devastatingly unequal that 2 billion people are living on less than $1 a day. So what does that make of us? Why are we so paralyzed? Why can't we react? Why can't we do anything? And this disillusion is a terrible grief at the inadequacy of human consciousness to deal with the consequences of any of its actions, let alone to step up and face the crisis head on and start making creative solutions to it. And when you make that conscious, then you really get to face the huge black cobra, the core of the shadow of this exploding crisis, which I've discovered for myself, and so many other sacred activists have confirmed this, is a death wish, really a desire not to be here at all in this terrible time, a desire to die, a desire not to have to go through what all of us are going to go through all together as this crisis deepens, because it's going to get very, very much worse before it has a hope now of getting better, because we've missed all the messages, we've missed all the signs, we've done nothing real about the environment, and we are now facing unspeakable and unpredictable chaos on every level. Years ago, I had a friend who I love very much, who was a French woman, and she gave up her life in Paris and went off to be with the Yamamis and made herself a hell of a nuisance. She was a fascinating woman and very brave, and I thought that, if the atom bomb came, she would be the last person with Cher and Madonna and a few cockroaches to survive it. She was that strong. But then I got a letter in which she told me that when I got that letter, she would be dead because she was going to commit suicide because she couldn't live anymore in a world without conscience, a world that simply didn't care. And when I got that letter, I was terribly sad, but I was also vain. I thought, oh my God, poor darling, she didn't have the mystical experiences I've had, so she couldn't be really grounded enough in the divine to be able to stand this awakening. And then about 2 weeks later, I was in a library in New York, and I was reading about the oil companies in Nigeria and how they have ruined Nigeria with full collusion of the black political class, and of course full collusion with the capitalists and the politicians of all the classes, because everybody wants the oil. They don't care that it's polluting the rivers and killing thousands of Africans and birthing babies that are deformed and annihilating species. That means nothing to them because they need the oil to keep the death machine going. And as I read, I found myself going through all those stages: denial, disbelief, dread, disillusion, and then finally, I got to what had been underneath so deep that I'd never got to it before. And I started to feel nausea, and I left the library, and it was a cold February day. I gazed out at the meaningless stream of New York traffic in that terrible gray February light, and there was a moment when I really wanted to just go down and lie down in the middle of the traffic and end it. And that was the moment when I realized that, of course, I had this death wish. I'd just not been brave enough to face it. And since then, it's made me much humbler and much more compassionate towards myself, because I realize that all of us who are turning up in this crisis will have to make those 5 shadows conscious to be of any use. And then I went on a journey into the shadows, the personal shadows, both in myself and in everybody I know, that are colluding with these 5 shadows. And what I discovered was that there were very, very deep and dark personal shadows that we all share, which we also have to make conscious to be able to liberate the creative energies of both the light and the dark feminine, that are the birthing powers of the new. I began to discover just how deep our narcissism is, and my narcissism is. We live in an almost entirely narcissistic society, which is all about me, me, me. And this narcissism is malignant and infects even our discussion about the highest mystical truths. It is a virus that has attacked all parts of our personal, public, and spiritual lives. And until you become very conscious of that virus, you may be uttering what seem to be very inspiring things that actually are not going to really be effective because they're contaminated by that virus. I discovered that I was, while pretending to be a kind of hero of sacred activism, still terrified of losing my semi-comfortable lifestyle. I am certainly not rich and I don't have very much money, but I have a lot more money than those people who are living to 2 billion people living on $1 a day. And a part of me, like everybody in this crisis, is simply terrified at losing the iPads and the computer connections and the CDs and the luxuries, really, that we take for granted, that we become entitled to. I discovered, too, that there was a part of me and everybody else that was simply terrified of standing up and telling the truth, because you and I and everybody listening knows by now exactly what happens to truth tellers, to whistleblowers. On a large scale, we've seen Robert Kennedy and Jack Kennedy and Martin Luther King assassinated. We've seen people thrown into prison for years and left to rot because they dared to stand up. We've seen people tortured. We've seen Mandela in prison for 26 years, and we can glamorize that if we like, but imagine 26 years in the cell for standing up for the justice of the black people. So part of us, all of us, is absolutely terrified of telling the truth and of being real, because we know that we're in a culture of lies, a culture of very powerful lies, and that those lies are murderous and will kill us or maim us or strip us of our cash or to marginalize us in deep ways if we ever really get real. I discovered, too, that one of the things that really governs much of what happens, especially in America, is what Carolyn Masis called woundology, and that there's a part in all of us that says, oh my God, I'm simply not strong enough to stand up and deal with any of this stuff, any of the 5 shadows of this crisis, or my own shadows, or any of this darkness and pain, because I was abused as a child, or I was abandoned as a child, or I was rejected as a child, or this happened to me, and I am going to spend the rest of my life going over those wounds and using them as an excuse not to step raggedly and brokenly, but with great brio, into my own true divine path. That I'd done this in secret ways, and that everybody I knew was doing this in the other secret ways. I discovered, too, that it wasn't simply that I had these shadows, but I also had something else that was very subtly damaging, that I had what I call a golden shadow, so that I could revere Rumi or the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa and say to myself, these are absolutely amazing people, look at them, they're so extraordinary, I'll never be like them, I'm just Andrew Harvey, and I'm a bit of a wreck, I don't really understand very much, but I've been given all these experiences, so I'm going to do just my best. So really what I'm doing, and what everybody else I know is doing, is projecting their own unlived divine possibilities onto heroic figures as a very convenient way of not doing the inner or the outer work to become like them ourselves. Jesus didn't come to be worshipped as Jesus. Jesus came to Jesus, all of us, but to be Jesus, you have to do the Jesus work. You can't just float into Jesushood. You have to go through the crucifixion into the resurrection. So really taking responsibility for becoming the kind of person you admire is something that very few of us are truly, if we're honest, prepared to do. It's much more convenient to worship the guru or an icon. Mm-hmm. So when you bring together those shadows, the shadows of the exploding crisis and these shadows that are very, very much the shadows that we now live with in this culture as it's been set up, you realize that without shadow work, without this patient, grueling, humbling, painful, extremely sobering look at these shadows, and without making them, as far as you can, conscious, bringing them into the light, you're really talking drivel and acting from a very small consciousness. You're not being useful, and you're not being real, and you're not truly contributing to the birth. But it really does demand a great capacity for suffering, a great commitment to truth, and a great trust in divine grace. And that's what every serious seeker and every sacred activist now should really be praying for, the strength to incarnate all those three things.
Wow. Very, very true. We're almost out of time here, but I feel I've reconnected with you. There's so much to do. We are very dedicated to bringing the understanding of the shadow aspect of this work.
Thank you so much. You could
and I would love to interface with you and your Institute for Sacred Activism. I'm feeling called to take a next step, and I've been praying to know what that is. And I do feel it's interfacing with people like you and a few others and creating practical ways for people to begin this journey. I'm contemplating a workbook right now, which is a small thing, but nonetheless, something that people can dive into because there are more and more people who are starting to pay attention. But it is such a huge territory that some sort of midwifery could be appropriate. And I would love to actually discuss that with you further, bring you back on. We're almost out of time here. We would like to you to mention your book again, and I'd love to have you on again and go into more depth. We have just a few minutes. Am I right, Christina? How are we doing on the time? She's much better with the time than I am.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay, Andrew, I don't know. I mean, it's insane to stop this conversation at all, but do you want to talk a bit about your book again?
Well, first of all, I'd really love to hear how everybody has received this, because I've been giving this out. And I'd love it if you could just say something yourself. How would what I've said resonate with you? How, all of you there, it would be lovely if you could just say something, because there's something really strange about just talking. I'd love to hear from you.
Yes. I am deeply humbled, and it feels like you stripped away a lot of the places where I'm hiding, and it's giving me a much deeper palette to address my own issues and to look at the level of commitment to this work and to upgrade that enormously. And I'm feeling shocked and horrified in a very divine and inspired way.
Yeah.
How about you two? I'd love to hear from you.
This is Christina, and I'm just deeply moved by this conversation. Actually, feeling a lot of emotion coming up. I'm very inspired, and it's just very encouraging to me and where I'm in my journey and what I've also discovered, which is just right on par with so much of what you've been sharing, and just feeling a lot of gratitude and love. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Elizabeth. My heart is singing as you speak. The eloquence in which you put these kinds of experiences to words is, it just blows me away. It says a lot for, as we start coming into integration with all these lost aspects of ourselves, our talents are discovered or rediscovered. And you are a great example of someone who is in alignment with a purpose. And it's just so inspiring. And I think this is doing this show for me, I'll speak for myself, has been a calling of that nature. And it's just inspiring to see someone who's been through it as well and is called in this way, and how eloquently and direct and your message is coming through, and it's understood on that multidimensional level, and it just makes my heart sing to hear these beautiful words that you are able to come up with for these experiences. I'm fully inspired by your gift. So thank you for speaking those words. Thank you very much.
I mean, you say I'm aligned with my purpose, but I think you can only be aligned with your purpose when you know how unaligned you also are with your purpose. Don't you think?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
You will only really, truly stay with your compass turned to true north, the real true north, if you truly understand or begin to become conscious of all the parts that are buried in you that are really fighting against your purpose, that don't want you to succeed and don't care whether you succeed or not. And this is very difficult to hold those two things together, but it's the only way you can stay faithful. Yes. And get deeper and richer and wiser and more helpful.
Yes, and there was one point where I wanted to, while you were speaking, where I really brought me back to that clear understanding of the beauty of the juxtaposition of the opposites, and how that when those merge, there's this beauty that's unfathomable, undescribable, and divine. And
yes, because that is the divine. The divine is the point of equilibrium between the opposites. It's both the opposites and the mysterious fusion of them and the interpenetration of them. Nicholas Creuser said, if there's one way you could describe the divine, it's as a coincidentia oppositor, and it's a coincidence, it's coming together with the opposites. And that is the universal testimony of the great mystics, and that's why I think a lot of the modern mysticism sold in the bazaar of the New Age is so damaging, because it simply doesn't honor the sacredness of the dark, honor the sacredness of the shadow. Until we do, we have no hope of birthing the new human, because the new human is born out of the marriage of the opposites, just as the universe and life itself is.
The New Age seems to me to be born out of that spiritual starvation, that starvation of love, the starvation of compassion, all of those things that we've turned away from traumas and things like that. Oh boy, we got to the break. Yes.
Well,
thank you very much.
Go to sacredactivism.org to find Andrew's website.
It's not sacredactivism.org, it's www.andrewharvey.net. www.andrewharvey.net. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Paving over this world, we won't all fit in, and all that we have is hope and love. So don't you worry, child. Don't you worry about a thing in the none. But those can lift us up so we can rise above. So we can rise above, and all that we have is hope and love. So don't you worry, child. So don't you worry about a thing in the none. But those can lift us up so we can rise above. So we can rise above the madness. There's enough wealth for everyone, but some have most and most have some. And there's enough food for us all to flourish. Tell me why are so many malnourished? You say there's weakness in an empty pocket, no, and I'll tell you there's weakness in an empty heart. And you say the strength and the power to control, and I'll tell you no, there's strength in only love and compassion. Soon we'll find our own way home, 'cause we all need a little healing sometimes. Soon we'll find our own way home, 'cause we all need a little healing. So give love, it's the only thing that heals you. Come on, sisters, give it to your brothers.